All right, sir. I believe we're alive. I'll just double check real quick. Computer's being slow on me. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Meet the Masters. Happy Friday morning for most of us. Tim Watson here, joined today by Master Stuart Soon. Hello, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Master Watson. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. How are things in Virginia right now?
Right now, at this
Oh
moment,
yeah, right now.
very, very, very wet. Lots of lightning, lots of thunder. I was going to stream from my dojang, but it's just raining so hard outside. I decided I would just do it from my living room rather than venture out into that nastiness.
I've done a couple in the dojang, and at least where at Evolution the acoustics aren't as good.
Hmm. Well,
So speaking of your dojang, how are things going with you? You kind of the umbrella is Nova Tongsudo, but yeah, talk about the studio right now.
well, I'm very, very, very fortunate. I have some incredible instructors who work with me. Mr. Schwartz, as you already know him, Miss Anna Jacoby, my son Steve, and of course on the other side, my wife Deborah owns Morningstar Master Z. Everybody knows her as, and we've got a lot of very good instructors who have dedicated a lot of time and effort. So thank you to everybody who has helped. Early on, when this whole pandemic began, and we first started doing our lockdown, um, it was within a couple of weeks that Mr. Schwartz and I and Deborah, we were all discussing how to start teaching online. And so we started with, Google Hangouts. We tried Twitch. Eventually, we settled down on a commercial account with Zoom. Um, and because we have a very, very educated population here, um, and pretty much everybody was on board and being able to Zoom within just a couple of days. We had everybody back online without missing a heartbeat, and so we were very fortunate. Unlike a lot of studios, we didn't suffer a lot of attrition. We had a few, but generally speaking, um, most all of our students have stayed, and in fact the parents have been very grateful because once we were able to go live, socially distanced outside and stuff, um, they were grateful because we're getting their kids off the computers.
Are you still at least in our dojang, I'm finding people still saying that they need their kids up and away from the computers. They just need to be out of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we have been doing school online in Fairfax, and the kids have been sitting down on in front of the computers, for 8 to 10 hours a day, and the parents are pretty much, saying, "Oh yeah, well, thank you for going live," and we also are fortunate that pretty much all of our high schoolers and parents as well, we've all been inoculated, and so um, thanks to the governor's rules, we're allowed to go without masks and such, and it of course really helps in training.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, as far as how are things on the college side and like your teaching?
Yeah, well, over at the community college where I teach at, we have gone back because of the resurgence, but mostly down in Southern Virginia. But we've had a resurgence, and so the governor went back to an indoor mask mandate at the college. Um, but it's pretty much only state facilities that are seeing that. Private shops like ourselves, we don't really have to do that. And in Northern Virginia, it's less of a concern than it is, say, down in Roanoke or Raleigh or something like that.
Gotcha. Well, we have a couple people chiming in. Master Marco from Sweden says Tong Su, sir.
I'm Sue, sir.
And Lindsay from Great Britain says good afternoon. She's watching. I wonder, Lindsay, what's the weather? Usually your weather is worse than ours. We might have you beat today. So speaking of Great Britain and the UK, let's go back and talk about how you got your start in the martial arts.
Oh, well, I met my wife in college back in '82, and we were married, and shortly then had our first kid. She got commissioned shortly after. And in '85, we were stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base at the Rec Center. Now, Malmstrom, Montana is rather snowy, cold place, and so a lot of our things were indoors. Well, I was fortunate that while in the gym one day, in walked this woman. Her name was Allison Bivens. She was an EDON in the American Taekwondo Association, and she was beginning classes. To which, of course, then I jumped at the opportunity, and Mrs. Bivens gave me a terrific foundation. She was a real stickler for, the proper formalities, being polite, being respectful, just basically following the rules. She lived the life of a martial artist, and she passed that down to me and all of her students. So that was where I began with, and I was able to stay with them for about a half year before my wife was transferred to Dallas Air Force Base, Texas. As soon as we got to Texas, I immediately looked up for new martial arts instructors, and I met a gentleman named Jim Guidry, who was also an EDON in Muda Kwan. He had gotten his training in Seoul, very, very old school, and his instructor, it was believed that he was the same General Park who trained the North Korean army and defected. And so, needless to say, the classes I took under Mr. Guidry were pretty rough, very old school, a lot of hitting, a lot of injuries.
Sure.
And that was my beginning.
Wow. I'm not surprised when I hear where you talk about like having the formalities and knowing you and knowing your studio, you're very traditional in that way. So, it's one of those things where some people pick up on the traditionals and formalities of their teachers, but not everyone does. But it's cool to hear that, because it's like, well, I know now I know where that comes from.
Yeah. Well, we are very traditional in that we follow the important things. When we address each other, it's always sir.
Right.
I even answer the children when they ask me questions. I answer them sir or ma'am, just to show them that it goes both ways. But at the same time, I believe that laughter is one of the most important aspects of training. In that, if a child walks out of your dojang and they're smiling, then that's a really good sign. It means they're going to come back. If they walk out and every time they walk out, they are complaining, then I'm doing something wrong.
Right.
That is a student who will not stay with you.
I agree 100%. And as you were saying that, last night I was teaching the Tigers and Dragons, and it was just one of those nights where they were awesome and we were joking around and having fun, but at the same time working hard too. I had a group where you can joke and then bring it back, and then joke and bring it back. That's not always the case with the little guys, but last night it was fun to do exactly what you said, with have fun, work hard, and then leave with a smile on their face.
Yeah. And that's just it, is that when they walk out smiling, that means that you've done something right. Um, and it's not all a joke, especially if they're sweating when they
Right.
leave. Then that means that what you've done is you've shown them that they can work hard and still enjoy themselves. And that's just going to help them in the future, with everything in life. That hard work doesn't necessarily mean it's unpleasant. It means that you can accomplish things and still have a great time. You know, um, I am a firm believer. I tell parents, you're always going to have a hard time at some point getting your kids to class. Make them come to class. Don't give them the chance to stay at home and stay online and play with their friends or watch TV or whatever they're going to be doing. When it's time to train, set that guideline, have them come. Now, if they ever leave my class and they're not happy, then I'm doing something wrong. If they come because they'd rather be at home, if they're mad when they come because they'd rather be at home, don't worry about it. Just bring them. I'll take care of that. But if they leave and they're not happy, let me know. I've got it.
It's that it's a good reminder for instructors to try to remember that. Leave them, was the three S's: sweating, smiling, and sore.
I'd never heard that one. I like it.
No, really? That was I must have heard it from Master Godwin or someone. Yeah, sweaty, smiling, and sore. You want to with those three. Sabin and Russell says, "Good day, Master Watson and Master Soon." Bill Whiteside, you might know that guy, says good morning. And Mr. Bracco from Region 9 and Lucinda Oyen from down in Alabama says good morning.
Oh my goodness. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, everyone's waking up.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you all out there. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, if anyone has a particular question that they want to ask Master Soon, feel free to put it in the chat. So going back, you talked about training in Texas. What was the next stop?
Well, we went to Japan and Hawaii. In both places, I didn't find Tang Soo. I tried Shotokan. I tried a couple of other classes, and they just didn't quite work out. I tried a Taekwondo class where there was a particularly unkind instructor who, let's just put it this way, he was mean, and I was not going to condone a person like that by taking his class. Not that I couldn't take it, because I certainly gone through the Muda Kwan class in Texas and survived that. I made it all the way up to first go. But this particular guy was mean. I mean, he was mean to the kids, and the only people he seemed who seemed to stay in his class were all pretty much thugs who just wanted to beat each other up. And I wasn't going to stay with that or condone it. So I didn't train for about 7 years because we had two duty stations. But then we made it to England, and that was kind of an interesting thing, because when we got to England, my two sons were in elementary school, and one of them was getting bullied on the bus. So I said, okay, you guys need to start training. I took them to this community center on RAF Alconbury. And there they enrolled in a Tang Soo Do class. I said, oh, I know what that is. That's pretty much Muda Kwan. They came back after their first day, just excited and just crazy. And they said, oh, you should see our instructor. I said, who's your instructor? It's a guy named Master Khan. Master? How many kids are in your class? And they went, 6. Are you sure he's a master? And they said, yeah, he's a master. Because having been in the martial arts for a couple of years, I'm thinking, the masters usually assign lower belts for the small classes. Not okay, great. So I didn't I wanted to go see for myself. And I walked into the gym, and in walks this little, and when I say little, I mean he's only this much taller than me. This little, Pakistani man. And I look in there he is. And I'm quietly to myself, I'm saying, huh, I could take this guy. Stupid. I was just so stupid. Well, he introduces himself to me. He puts on his belt. I says, I've never seen a belt like that way, because in the old system, they didn't have the red band through the belt. I says, what rank are you? He says, oh, I'm a Faddan, a master. Oh. Then he explained to me why he was teaching the class. Oh. He had a personal vested interest in it. And it was kind of was surprising. So I found out he had a bigger class downtown. Well, later on, the kids were enrolled in their first tournament, and it was held down there where his big studio is at. It was a community center, and they had taken the whole floor up. I would say the floor was probably a good 2,000 square feet or so. No, maybe a good deal more than that. Actually, probably more like about 4,000 square feet. And the hall was packed with contestants and spectators. And I was sitting in the room lost. I had my 2 little orange belts with me. And I hear somebody yell, "Chariot!" And everybody faces the door at attention. And me not yet belonging to the association, I'm looking at the door. And in walks Master Khan. And they, kids, Kunye. And everybody bows, and I guess I'm supposed to bow. And my reaction was, I know him. Yeah, that's my kid's teacher. He calls me Stu, and I call him Mujahid. Well, after that, I realized, wow, this guy's the real deal. He's controlling this huge tournament, and everybody's looking to him. He's number one in the tournament. And I realized, wow, this guy really is, the big cheese here. So I started training with him shortly after I finished up my classes at the college. And boy, that training was rough, but not rough in the way of injury, but rough as in he made us work.
Well, it sounds like from what I've talked to him and people that have trained with him that he walked the walk, and if he was making you do it, then he was doing it as well.
Yeah, pretty much every time. That's the way it worked. What got me was that when I started training with him, like I said, it was extremely difficult, but at the same time, he was not unkind. As a matter of fact, he had this kind of funny way of like, if he saw me struggling, he would look at me and then smile, almost like laughing, like, "Come on, Stu, you got to get through this. Just keep going." And it was reassuring, and it really did keep me going, and in the entire time I was there, he never injured me. But like, for instance, the first time I sparred him, I found out just how good he really was. In that, without even trying, I mean, he would just take his foot and tap me in the side of my headgear, and he was able to do it at will. Just tap me in the head. "Stuart, you got to protect your head." And then, "Oh, Stuart, you got to protect your stomach." That's what I was left doing. You realize this guy's really, really good. And no, I can't take this guy.
Yeah, but I love, so in my classes lately, we've been talking a lot about control in sparring. We got some young students that, teens, and they're starting to grow into their bodies and not quite figuring out how to have as much control, and to I try to explain those things, like if you're an excellent martial artist, you can show someone that you could have hit them pretty hard with a tap like that. That's all you need. And to hear him say, or to hear you say that, that's one of the signs of a true master. And I heard that back in the day that sparring was his thing. Yep. And Lindsay says Master Khan's classes haven't changed.
Oh, I'm sure they haven't, Lindsay. And the thing is that Master Khan was always good at pushing me forward and driving me. And it seems like he did that with all of his students, not just me, but he was able to inspire and motivate all of us to go forward. He is one of those instructors who I do my best to emulate, because what he taught me works, and I make a point of then trying to pass that on to my students. There was a particular time I recall when I was the highest ranking person in class. I was just getting ready to test for Chodan, and I was able to, my alarm just came off again, warning for the weather. But I was able to spar with everybody, all the brown belts and green belts, and it was pretty easy at that point for me. With great fear in my eyes, Master Khan comes charging out of the stands wearing his sparring gear. He goes, "Come on, Stuart, you're gonna spar me. You're having it too easy."
That's great.
Yeah.
You feel like you're doing good, and it's like, no.
Yeah. Well, it's more than humility. Like I said, he always wanted to push me.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, having known that I had earned first GUP a few years back, within about a year, he had trained me and awarded me my first GUP belt, and then told me that I was training 3 days a week, and he said, quote, "Okay, Stu, you're going to be a black belt before you leave. You better take 4 classes a week." Yes, sir. And so I did, and it was painful. And then in the May before we transferred out, I tested for Chodan. And it was hard, but it was worth it.
That's awesome. So how long were you able to actually train with him before you guys moved?
We were there for 3 years, and
Okay.
I trained for 2.5 of those.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you got in more than 2.5 years worth of classes in that time.
Oh my gosh, he pushed me so hard. He pushed me so hard, it was crazy.
That's
But
awesome.
at the same time, what I learned is immeasurable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Gus Rogers from Great Britain says hello, Sabanan.
Hello, sir.
Great people. So once you leave there, is that when you moved to Virginia?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
We went straight to Region 8.
correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure. So kind of a preface. A couple of years ago, I guess it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, I wanted to do a talk at the Region 8 Black Belt Clinic, and I had the opportunity. Master Soon and I did a phone interview where I talked to him, and we talked about some of this stuff. And I never got a chance to use any of it because my talk kind of shifted, but I always appreciated having the time and getting to learn your backstory a little bit more. So it's fun to actually get to share it with people. Master Khan wanted you to start a studio or start a club once you got to the US, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. to quote him directly, you know, we had just one of the best. We have one of the best relationships in that I can tell you. Um, it was like in the last week or so of my training, of being there in England. Master Khan took me out to dinner and quote, Stuart, when you get to America, you need to open a studio. To which my response was, and I'm just a brand new Chodan of only a couple of months. And I responded to him and said, well, sir, I don't feel I'm ready. To which he sits up and looks at me and goes, Stuart, you know, whatever it was, like 5 years ago, when Grandmaster told me, Mujahid, I'm giving you Europe. I said, I don't think I'm ready for Europe. He said to me, Mujahid, somebody has to do the job. I'm saying to you, Stuart, somebody has to do the job. To which I could only shake my head and say, yes, sir. So I went to America, started training, and I was with a gentleman named Rockman, Mr. Rockman, and we fell under Master Britt's umbrella. When I got my EDON, I started looking for a studio. And on July 2nd of 2001, Rising Star was born. And Rising Star was the old name for what is now Nova Tsudo.
20 years. I didn't realize that was this year was your 20th anniversary.
It is.
That's awesome.
As of the beginning of the year.
That's excellent. You mentioned Master Rockman. Were you there with like Master Mukherjee and Master Giselle Sharp? Did you cross paths with them at all?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was a second-degree black belt when David Mukherjee first came to us. Now he had trained a lot, I think, in India,
Yeah.
under a similar discipline, and you know, I mean, he trained hard. He trained hard, and he just kept it up, and it was wonderful. When I finally ran into him again at you know, at Masters Camp and at the World Championships, I was so happy to see him. And he and I are really good friends. I mean, once again, I've gone and visited him, you know, down in Austin, stayed at his house and met his lovely family. Giselle Sharp is also very close to me. I've been to Houston and stayed with her. You know, and of course, I'm very grateful that I have all these friends down there, you know, in Texas, and I make a point of visiting them all when I get a chance.
That's great. And one of the awesome things about, you know, what we do and what we're a part of is really the people that we you know, make relationships with. We talked about that earlier with you know, you and the herds and just everyone around the association. It's pretty great.
Yeah, it is. And you know, I mean, it's wonderful that I have friends now that you know, that I've had the same friends in martial arts now for 25 years. It's like I was standing right next to people like Les Hart and Romel Bernardi, and we tested together side by side, you know. And I don't know if you saw, I had put up a Facebook post just a couple of days ago that it was only like 2 days ago, this time 7 years ago, that Ramel, myself, and Debbie had breakfast in Las Vegas, of all things. We've both been there at the same time. He was working with his company. I was taking Debbie to see some shows, and he saw me and said, "Hey, let's hook up for breakfast." And we did. You know, that's just the kind of friendship we had.
Yeah, I never got a chance to meet him, but seeing pictures with from you and talking to the GB Tungsudo community, it seems like he was a pretty great man.
He was a terrific person and a very good martial artist. I will tell you, it's like sparring with him was always kind of terrorizing because he was good. he, he put a little world of hurt on me.
Nice. I'm sure that you held your own. Kind of segueing into another topic. It's talking about sparring. I remember seeing you, for many years competing. I would be in one ring, and most of the time, your division would be right next to ours. Um, did you enjoy competing? Did you compete just because you were there, or what was your relationship with competitions?
Well, I think everything about competition is beneficial, really. Um, it shouldn't be your main focus as a martial artist, but at the same time, it does push you to work on the things that are important. For instance, it's like before tournament, I would always increase my training. I would make sure that I was prepared, make sure that um, I could present, um, my hymns or my weapons as best I could. I would try to sharpen up, make sure that I was paying attention to the important cues when we would spar. Um, and that little extra level of concentration, um, I believe really does help you be a better martial artist. But as a school instructor, it also gives you a little bit, gives your students a little more incentive to train harder too. And if I train harder and get ready for competition, they see that and they take it as a cue and say, wow, I better kick it up a notch too. And overall, it helps everybody. Now that's the training aspect of it. The other part of it is the camaraderie and friendship that comes out of competition. Um, I make a point of shaking everyone's hand in my ring. I make a point of introducing myself, wishing them good luck, you know. And if I lose, I make a point of shaking their hand, thanking them, and you know, I make sure I get names. I have got friends from years back because of competition. Um, so when Grandmaster told me that it was time for me to go to Masters Camp, I was I was so distraught. I thought, oh my gosh, that's it. I don't get to do this fun thing, competition. Don't get to do that anymore. And lo and behold, I walk into Masters Camp, and there's all the guys I competed with, and we're all testing for master. So competition brings a level of camaraderie that's that I think is super important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think of all of the guys that were in your ring that are now, you know, masters, yourself, Mr. Hurd, Master Geiter, even farther back, Mr. Brenner, lots of Master Harsh, lots of excellent martial artists that are now, excellent masters and high ranking people. Um, so after that, and actually, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You, at least in Region 8, well, I guess at World Championships too, have been in charge of the souvenir table for many years. How did that come about?
Well, actually, that started with my wife, Master Zamora soon.
Okay.
Um, she had been, she started off assisting Mrs. Shin, Grandmaster Shin's wife, um, because she had been running the souvenir table. Um, and Debbie, my wife, is very good at organizing things, and so she had been helping Mrs. Shin out, and eventually Mrs. Shin uh, gave it to Deb to run, and pretty much just said, you know what to do now, Deborah. You run this souvenir table, and so she did, and of course, then being the largest region when we went to the Worlds, they wanted to have a souvenir table that was as good as ours. Of course, they wanted one better, so they invited Debbie to run that. Well, eventually, Debbie opened up her own studio, took on a couple of the jobs here, and asked me if I would take it over because I'd been working with her all along. Um, and myself having had a lot of experience in retail from my younger years, um, I said sure, and that's pretty much how I kind of just segued into it.
I know you always have quite a few of the Nova students helping out. How instrumental are they in keeping things running for those events?
Well, that's just the thing about retail is you can't do it by yourself. No one can. So it's one of those kind of um, I expect it of my students to give up, an hour or two of their time when they're there, um, to assist in sales. And of course, I open it up to anybody else from who wants to help out to sign up and take an hour or two or half a day or whatever and assist. And all we do is make sure that if they are assigned to a ring, for whatever purpose, for competition, judging or whatever, that they are free at that time. But without the assistance of, um, you know, like my daughter-in-law, Megan, without her help, without Deborah's help, um, I don't think I could do this. So to answer the question, frankly, um, the assistance of my students is essential.
That's great, and luckily they're there to help you. So that's awesome. Jose Rivera from Puerto Rico says Tung Su.
So, sir.
Mr. Lyon says good morning, and George and
Hi.
Debbie Berardi say good morning as well.
Good morning, Mr. Lyons. Haven't seen you forever.
I know.
I hope my check didn't bounce. Just kidding.
So you mentioned your daughter-in-law. The first time I remember seeing you was at Black Belt camp. So my first camp was 2004, and they had it was either the Gong Show or like the talent show, and I know, bringing back memories. And you were up singing, and I believe you was either Stephen. It may have been your other son too. I don't remember. But you were up singing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your singing and music in your life, and then we'll segue. We've talked about Master Z. Segue into talking about Stephen and the family that way. So.
Well, the music has always been a part of my life, and as a matter of fact, I met Master Z in music school. Like I said, we were married in '82. She graduated that year, and she was in ROTC. But I had never stopped playing music. Wherever we moved. When we went overseas, especially, I usually took on jobs at the local at the base church as a music director, and in recent times I've gotten into recording and such, um, and so I I'm in a really good area for musicians just outside of Washington D.C., and I had a lifelong project that was to put out my own CD. Um, and I was able to do that thanks to, you know, thanks to my wife's help. Um, and she is, in fact, singing on most of the tunes. She's either background or lead singer on most of those tunes. But as far as the association goes, when we would stand up at the beginning of a tournament and whatnot, they would have a recording that was kind of an old scratchy recording, very worn out. You know, I think it was on a cassette tape, and we really need to have a new updated version um, of the national anthem and the association anthem. And so um, we went to the studios and made a CD with the Tuxedo anthem with more modern electronics, new voices. Mr. Z, soon to be Master Z, I hope, um, is singing the lead parts on many of those things, and Master Master Z, my wife, um, is also singing on all those parts. And about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I handed it to Grandmaster Bodwin as a gift and just said, "Sir, this is if you want to use this for the association." And I signed all the release forms and handed them over at the same time. And that's what you hear now when we bow in at tournaments.
That's cool. I didn't know that. That's you know, it's one of those things where I love, I've been I've been kind of struggling with this in my own life. Like, it seems like you have these moments in your life where something comes up, and like Master Khan says, just do it. You know, we haven't even talked about Grandmaster Shin a whole lot, but I know that there's moments where he's told you, you know, to just get it done. You know, Master Z gets told by Mrs. Shin that she wants her to do the souvenir part. You know, so then you knew at some point someone was going to ask you to do it, so you just got it done. And you
Yeah,
got
well,
that.
I think that's kind of the way it is when you belong to an association like this. You realize that if you just sit on your hands, the association wouldn't thrive. You know, and that's why I'm very grateful to people like you and Master Heiss. You know, I mean, without folks like you picking up the ball and leading, I don't know who would do it. You know, I mean, I am forever grateful to Master Fattori for, you know, running Region 8 since Grandmaster Shin had moved down to North Carolina. And, you know, I mean, it was the most invaluable time you can imagine. Um, Training under him, you know, now we've got Master Heiss, and I'm just looking forward to many more years with her. Um, Without the people to pick up the ball, we would falter and die.
Right. So let's talk about Grandmaster Shin. When do you remember the first time you got the opportunity to meet him, or at least, you know, like get up and have him sign your dobak?
The first time I met him, we were at a tournament in Huntingdon, England, and he terrified me. He terrified me. He was so quiet, so pensive, and you know, nothing gets past the man, right? Um, but then as we started doing more and more things with him, especially once we moved to Region 8 and I opened my own studio, well, then I had to train directly under him, which was the greatest privilege of my martial arts life. that I was able to train with him, like every other month for about 12 years, which was incredible. I mean, there's not many people who can make that claim. Um, so with that privilege came also getting to know the man, um, you know, who was the grandmaster. And the one thing I will say about him that I remember above all else was his laugh. Um, this is a man who had so much joy in his heart and so much joy to share. Um, it was just remarkable. And his sense of humor, he shared with everybody. He was able to laugh at himself. He was willing to crack jokes, and it was just like a great a great relationship that he developed with, especially with the people who had the privilege of really knowing him and spending that kind of time. Um, there was one particular incident that came to mind, um, and you probably remember this one pretty well. Um, I had been approached by Masters Maybroda and uh, Marbrook about doing a skit with the Godwin School. Um, it was just for the talent show, and we did a parody on the Karate Kid. For those people who didn't see or don't know, Grandmaster Shin had three sayings that he always stressed. He said, "Be on time, one more time, no hanky panky." That was his three things that we always had to repeat. Right. Well, in this skit, um, Master Marbrook, back then he was a sound on Mo, as I called him. Mo asked me a kind of a silly question, to which then after a big string of things, the big punchline was I looked into the audience and I went, "No hanky panky," and the people went hysterical. I mean, they were laughing so hard. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw Grandmaster laughing. And I thought he was going to fall out of his chair. He was laughing so hard, I thought he was going to fall out of his chair. He's a person who had the ability to laugh at himself as well. Um, but there was an other side of him that I also will remember is that very serious leader. Um, that along with that great joy also came a very serious, deep integrity. And when I say integrity, I mean that when it comes to like the five codes of tennis, our rules, he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He lived it, breathed it, ate it, and it demanded it of us. Um, and that side of the man I learned to fear. But when I say fear, I don't mean like fear as in he's going to beat me up fear, but more like the fear a child feels when they're afraid they might do something wrong to disappoint their father. Um, and I suppose in that way, Grandmaster Shin was kind of like a second father. And um, so, when I say fear, what I meant, I guess I really should choose to say is um, I respected him and his opinion. And, if I could live even halfway up to the level that he lived, as far as following the codes and whatnot, then I'd be doing pretty good because Grandmaster Shin set a bar that was so high, you know, I'm lucky just to be able to see that bar, much
Right.
less reach it.
Yeah, I always think of if someone ever asked me about like, oh, when am I going to test for a new belt, or when is this going to come? When is that going to come? Like sometimes I'll be like, Grandmaster Shin was the same rank for almost 30 years. He had that he refused to get promoted to ninth degree black belt until he had a physical um headquarters for the association, and just the selflessness that takes. It's like, and he, I heard people talk, and he would just kind of like, no, 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 and then he finally got it. But yeah, it's one of those that's like it's that old, the old, it's just a piece of cloth around your waist, and he lived that kind of mindset, like you said. um so yeah.
Yeah, he walked the walk.
Yeah,
That's the bottom line. He walked the walk.
I love that. We mentioned Mr. Z earlier. Again, going back to when I first came into black belt clinics, I'm pretty sure he was already at Edon in that time, like 04, 05. If not, then he probably would have gotten it soon. And he would show up at every event, and he'd have those still those same two stripes on it. And he was like one of the longest standing Edons, and then finally got his Samdan, and now is going through the process of master. And I'm super happy that he's finally going to take his place in that kind of pantheon of instructors, just because it's one of those, he deserves to be there. And I can name 4 or 5 people that were in the same boat. So maybe talk about his journey, and being able to see him go through that process, and finally get to that point.
Well, as far as him staying at the second and third degree ranks for so long, I think that a lot of that comes because of the competition. That as soon as you become a master, this for the benefit of those people who don't know about our association. As soon as you become a master, you can no longer compete. And my family has always loved competing. Um, and so I think that Mr. Z, my son, Steve, um, liked it, liked it a lot as well. And he wasn't really ready to give it up. And just like myself, when Grandmaster told me that it was time for me to become a master, um, it was a very sad time in that competition was being taken away. So I understand it. As far as his journey goes, um, you know, um, I mentioned that we originally started because one of my sons was being bullied. Um, but once we got started in Tungsten, and once I joined in with them, um, Tungsten really became a very integral part of raising my kids. Um, we have an older son who I tried to get started in martial arts back in Texas when I had that Mudaquan class, that really brutal one.
Yeah.
And, you know, there just wasn't that level of love with that class. And my, 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 my oldest son then just didn't continue on. Well, by the time I went to England, my oldest son was already an adult. And so he didn't go with us to England, and thereby didn't get the benefit of training with the World Tongue Center Association. Um, and that's kind of a really huge benefit. The association is such a great family organization. And the way that we teach is geared towards, you know, the family. Um, One of the stories I like to tell is about my teenage years in Hawaii. I had uh, my best friend. I was about 16 years old, and I just had to stop seeing him. Had to stop hanging out with him because as we got older and older, it started with the smoking the pot and drinking the beer, and you know, we were kids, and I would share with them, and it had to stop when they started doing the heavier drugs. Um, Now, the thing about this friend is that he grew up pretty much without a father. And I walked into his room one day and they were snorting these little tiny white lines of powder and told me that one of their friends had got him some what's called China White, which is heroin. And I just had to back away and, oh, that's good for you. See ya. And that was the last time I ever hung out at his house, ever, because I knew he was going way too deep. And he had the most dysfunctional family because, like I said, his father wasn't there. Um, Sister got pregnant, all kinds of things, just no structure that they could, you know, they didn't have someone to learn from, sadly enough. Now let's fast forward about 30 years, 20, 30 years, and I'm raising my kids. We're doing Tang Sado. We travel together. We've got a strong family structure. We have this common activity. We struggle together. We talk. And the biggest problem I had was getting one of my sons to do the dishes. I'll take my problems over what my old high school friend
I, I love that story, and yeah, you can't say it any better as a parent. If that's, getting them to clean their room or put away the dishes, if that's the worst of your problems, you're doing okay. So I like that analogy. It's one of those, as a father of a 12 and a 10-year-old, every once in a while I need to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, and they can be trying, especially when they get real defiant.
Yeah.
I get that, right? Um, but I think as parents, we stick to our guns, we guide them, and if they are learning their lessons from us, eventually they will, all those lessons kick in.
Right.
You know?
So we're that your alarm, you gotta go.
Yeah, that's for me to feed my dogs.
So we are at pretty much at that 1 hour mark. And again, I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank everyone for watching along. Do you have any closing comments, sir, before we wrap up?
Yeah, real fast. I really owe a debt of gratitude to my instructors, Allison Biven, Mr. Guidry, Master Khan, Master Britt, and of course Master Vaughn. But I would also like to really extend an extra thank you as well to Master John Godwin, because even though he was never my instructor, he has always welcomed me into his schools. Um, he's invited me for seminars, for training, all types of things. He's led us in so many ways. And to me, he is what the consummate Sabanim should be. He's the whole package. And the one thing that impressed me the most was something that happened a few years back. we had both been sitting on a special dragons test, and Master Godwin had been there to help one of your students. His name was Sam. He was autistic, and it was kind of a really interesting moment. Master Godwin was kind of there to make sure that Sam would stay focused because autism is his issue. And I remember watching as they said, okay, we're going to ask you guys to do Basai. Well, Sam was doing this. And Master Godwin said to him, Sam, look here, focus here. You see me? And Sam went, he says, we're going to do Basai. You know Basai, right, Sam? And Sam went, okay. And then he told the conductor, he's ready, go ahead. And that to me showed me something that I didn't know about Master Godwin, that he's not just a great instructor, a great administrator, but he's a humanitarian, he's a leader. And if I could be half that instructor, I'd be doing pretty good.
Great story. And, for the record, I think you are, more than half. I'm also biased in thinking that Master Godwin was a great instructor, being, coming up under his tutelage, which, you talked about 20 years as a studio. This year is actually in November will be my 20 years in training. So we got we share a little anniversary there, so that's kind of fun. So again, I want to thank you for joining me, sir. It was a pleasure. It's good to see you. It's been too long.
It has been, sir.
And hopefully we get a chance to connect in person soon.
Yep.
Again,
hopefully we'll see each other at Region 8. That's
right. Well, thank you all for joining us. And sir, once again, thank you. Tong Su.
It was my pleasure and my honor. Tang Su.
See you soon.
Thank you, sir.